This video contains spoilers for The Last of Us video game. There are also minor spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2 and Chernobyl. I will also be using footage from interviews and trailers about the show, which can potentially spoil it, so be aware. All gameplay comes from YouTubers SourceBy91 and Shirako. Links to their channels in the description. In my last video, I talked about Alien Isolation and how that game managed to recreate the world of Alien in interactive form. Playing Alien Isolation is a magical experience in which you get to enter and interact with a world that you are already familiar with through non-interactive media. If that raises your interest, go check out that video, but this time we will be looking at a phenomenon that is the opposite to Alien Isolation. The Last of Us is one of the most celebrated games within the last decade. It feels weird to even write an intro for this essay because surely, if you are watching this video, you've already played it or at least know the story. But I do recognize that everyone doesn't have a PlayStation, and because the Steam release of The Last of Us is coming next March, I will issue a spoiler warning here. I am also going to be working with the assumption that you, the viewer, already know the story of the game. By the way, this spoiler warning also includes the Left Behind DLC that came out for The Last of Us. This video is about HBO's adaptation of The Last of Us debuting on the 15th of January. I'm going to be speculating about the narrative, the character's structure, and the overall adaptation of The Last of Us into a non-interactive medium. This is my second draft of this essay. I was almost done with my first draft and about to move into the editing process when, quite suddenly, The New Yorker published an article about the creation of the show. This article contradicted most of the points that I had written, and therefore, the first draft of this essay became outdated even before it was published. I mean, I guess such are the circumstances when just writing about a show that is just about to debut. And adding to that, I'm recording this on the 10th of January, and the review embargo for The Last of Us TV show has just lifted. So reviews are pouring out, and I have not read any of them, and they are not implemented into this essay. So I picked the most garbage time to write this essay. I thought it would be good for the SEO. But yeah, let's see how wrong I am. Well, anyway, to the point. This HBO adaptation of The Last of Us is helmed by Neil Druckmann, who is the writer and co-director of the game, and Craig Mazin, who is probably best known for being the host of Scriptnotes and writing Hangover 3. I think he had another HBO show, but I'm also pretty sure that it flopped or something, so let's just move on. Okay, so all jokes aside, I can't write this essay without acknowledging that Mazin, and John August by extension, are the reason I know anything about screenwriting. Like, it feels weird to even talk about their work outside the podcast Scriptnotes, as I have been an avid listener for years now. I don't claim to know everything about how Mazin writes his shows, but I do know the nuggets of information that he has given the audience on Scriptnotes. And we're actually gonna be using a nugget of information from that show on this essay as well. As far as Druckmann goes, he considers Robert McKee's story to be like the Bible. Having read that book, perhaps I can reflect a bit on the choices that he will make throughout the show. Before we can proceed to speculating about this adaptation, we will need to look at the elements that made the game stand out from its peers. This will inform us about the things that need to be maintained from the game to the show so that it will have the same impact. The Last of Us launched in the golden age of daddy simulators. Lest we forget that this was also the year that BioShock Infinite launched, and the two games even had a playful rivalry about which one would get the higher Metacritic rating. Okay, so apparently I can't find any news articles about this, but I do remember distinctly that this happened actually. A year before the launch of The Last of Us or BioShock Infinite, Telltale's The Walking Dead had kicked off the daddy simulator mania with its depiction of a man and an abandoned child surviving a zombie apocalypse. So on this landscape, what made The Last of Us stand out? I would say that The Last of Us stood out because of its masterful narrative, its grounded depiction of humanity on its knees, because of the fantastic performances, and because it had a banger of an original soundtrack. At least that's what the common narrative is about the success of The Last of Us. Many will also point out that The Last of Us marked a departure for Naughty Dog as a company. I won't talk about ludonarrative dissonance here, as pretty much everything that there is to be said about the change from Uncharted to The Last of Us has already been said. If you want to learn about that, Google ludonarrative dissonance and have fun with a conversation that was all the rage 10 years ago. For me, personally, The Last of Us just was that game that absolutely nailed the juxtaposition of beauty and bleakness. There are moments in this game in which it feels like the world has lost its way in such an irreversible way that humanity just should stop trying to make the world a better place. And then, suddenly, the game hits you with one of these moments.
Don't scare it.
I won't.
What are you doing?
It's all right. Come here. Hey, fella. Hurry up. Come on.
Hey there. So fucking cool.
Suddenly, those moments of darkness don't seem so gruesome anymore. Beauty still exists in this world, and if there's a chance to protect it, we should do it. It's pretty clear to me that The Last of Us was inspired by the film Children of Men, which also involved a man protecting the quote-unquote last hope of humanity in an extremely bleak world. What I didn't suspect was that The Last of Us would actually reach those levels that I felt watching that film. Just like Children of Men, The Last of Us is a narrative about hope in its many forms. The hope for a cure for the world, the hope for a future, and the hope for a personal redemption. It's kind of funny to me that The Last of Us and BioShock Infinite were ever even compared. They're just so different as narratives. And as a person who didn't like Infinite, even during the launch, this point has always stuck out to me. Okay, so this is the part where I start to use the information from the article a bit more liberally. Mazin has stated that a large section of the show Bible was about the nature of violence.
There are no spoilers here for The Last of Us. I apologize to those of you who are looking for them. But in the outline, in the show Bible, one of the little sections was a section on violence and what our philosophy about violence was, how we wanted to portray it, and what we thought was important philosophically for everybody to know as we went ahead writing and then producing the show. So it's your chance to basically get anything off your chest you want that you want other people to know.
This is something that is, in my humble opinion, more expressed in the second game than the first, but even the first game didn't shy away from showing gratuitous violence. This will be reflected in the show's tone. Every life taken is a tragedy, but then again, that is the cost of surviving in a world like this. As most of the gameplay of The Last of Us is about shooting, sneaking, and collecting resources, I expect that those elements will not be as crucial as they were in the game. I'm sure some of you are already rolling your eyes due to this being pretty self-evident in a non-interactive medium, but it wouldn't be very entertaining to watch Joel collect resources for 10 minutes every episode. I suspect that those elements of the gameplay will be kept in the show, but they will be more of a small detail, even a Easter egg of some kind. Relating to the differences in interactive and non-interactive mediums, a quote from Mazin has caused quite a stir on the internet during the last week. The quote is from the aforementioned New Yorker article, and it goes like this. When you're playing a section, you're killing people, and when you die, you get sent back to the checkpoint. All those people are back, moving around in the same way. At a certain point, they read as obstacles, not as human beings. In the show, such encounters would carry more weight. Watching a person die, I think, ought to be much more different than watching pixels die. Now, this quote has been ripped to shreds by the internet due to it being quote-unquote disrespectful towards the game. People are a bit on edge because so many of these video game adaptations have historically failed. So, the main showrunner, who wrote 7 of the 8 episodes by the way, being this glib about a video game can genuinely inspire umbrage. Here's the thing though, I see where Mazin is coming from with this quote. When Joel shoots someone in The Last of Us, the enemy doesn't go down gurgling blood most often, or by begging for their life. That's something that was later implemented into the second game. You can also see this in the latest remake of the first game, but I do not recall it being in the original release. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that, by the way. This alludes back to the earlier mention of ludonarrative dissonance. I guess I'm gonna talk about this, even though I said I wouldn't. A hostile NPC in The Last of Us is an obstacle that is to be either sneaked around or mowed down. A hostile character in a movie, TV show, or whatever is more than that. Since there is no gameplay, then taking out that specific, often unnamed character isn't supposed to be fun like it is in video games. There's, of course, exceptions in action films, for example, like John Wick, in which the main character mows down a platoon worth of unnamed guards, and it's very fun. And I should clarify, the Mazin quote is not good. I just want to make that clear. Saying that a death in a video game is less than a death in a non-interactive medium is not true every time. Like, especially if you're talking about Joel in The Last of Us. The death animations are often very gruesome and shocking, and a similar example could be made about Dead Space. Just because the player respawns after this doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on the player. I think what Mazin meant with this quote is that since the show will focus more on the impact and gratuity of violence, death of characters will also be more impactful. I don't think the show Joel Miller will be racking up a body count like the game Joel Miller. Furthermore, the violence will be anything but fun in the show. I would be very surprised if Joel carried a 2x4, 2 shotguns, a sniper rifle, and 4 pistols. Oh, and a bow and arrow, of course. Like, forgot about that one. And hey, if it sounds like I'm making fun of The Last of Us, know that I'm really not. Like, Joel killing hundreds of people and carrying an arsenal, building bombs, etc. functions in video game logic. It's fun. It doesn't lessen the impact of the narrative at all for me. I don't think a non-interactive medium has these luxuries, though. If your Uncle Bob, who doesn't really play video games but wants to watch the show, decides to watch the adaptation, it's going to be a bit weird to him that Joel kills so many people and carries an arsenal. Therefore, it's not really a surprise that the show will have a more grounded tone, striving for realism. And on the topic of realism, it does seem to me like the showrunners and crew are a bit afraid of the show being only seen as an adaptation of a video game. Most of the featurettes for the show have the crew saying stuff like, oh, the cordyceps is a real thing actually, and if it transferred to humans, it would actually do this.
The whole fungus cordyceps infection is based on science. Like, it theoretically is possible, and that's what was like also terrifying.
That fungus is real. If it were to be able to infect humans, it would go like that. It's terrifying.
The earlier Mazin quote also kind of reflects this viewpoint. They are very concerned that the average non-gamer viewer will see that this is an adaptation and just be turned off by the whole notion. Although I can also imagine that in the eyes of the non-gaming public, all video game adaptations are the same. Oh, that The Last of Us show, I won't watch it. I just saw Sonic 2, The Attack of the Furballs. These video game movies are terrible. Like, I'm genuinely sure that some people are going to be like that. Okay, so I've rambled a lot during this section, but the final thing that I want to say is that the resource collecting and sneaking will probably be implemented into the show as a minor detail or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see Joel pocketing some canned beans or something on occasion. As far as the stealth sections go, I expect that the show will have at least 2 scenes which focus heavily on Joel and Ellie staying silent during an intense encounter. The clickers function by echolocation, so it wouldn't be surprising if the show ripped a page from the book of Don't Breathe and made the characters stay completely silent while trapped in a single location. Based on the game and the trailers so far, I think it will be the part where they visit the museum, because that apparently exists in the show. There's going to be scenes of action, obviously, but it won't be the main focus in the show, except when making a point about the nature of violence in this world, or when showing how dangerous the infected actually are. Okay, so that's enough about gameplay. Let's move on to the narrative. My initial thoughts on the adaptation of the game were that it would probably be pretty easy, as The Last of Us is already a fairly linear game with movie-like cinematography and a narrative that doesn't take into account player choice. Except where it actually matters.
Teamwork.
I know that there's going to be the, well, actually, people in the comments, so I'll say that Left Behind does actually have minor player choice. There, I said it. Regardless, the narrative is largely the same for everyone who plays the game. So, it's easy, right? Just take out the gameplay and replace it with some action scenes and then retell the story as it is. Except this leads to a 2-hour-length film with absolutely terrible pacing. So, what did the screenwriters do? Well, it's pretty clear to me, from the featurettes and the New Yorker article, that they expanded. There's new characters, new locations, new events.
When you're adapting something like a video game, changes have to be done smartly. We are telling more. There is so much in between.
In this shot from the trailer, it looks like Bill has been mortally wounded, even though Bill never takes a shot in the game. This expansion makes sense, as the writers need to fill out those gameplay hours with something else. So let's have a look at the things that the writers could have expanded upon. Let's begin with characters. The most natural place to start this examination is with the protagonists. Everything in this game is seen either from Joel or Ellie's point of view. Joel and Ellie are virtually in every scene of the game, and their relationship is without a doubt the highlight of the whole narrative. Joel. So let's start from the beginning. I won't describe every scene in the game, but the beginning of The Last of Us is something that is integral to the setting of the tone for the whole narrative, so it's worth examining. Furthermore, the trailers actually confirm that this is also in the show. Joel is apparently about to lose his job. A bit of banter between Joel and Sarah. Then they go to sleep. Sarah wakes up to Joel not being in the house. She finds him coming from the yard, covered in blood and holding a revolver. Something's terribly wrong. Their neighbor crashes into the window. The two run out and are picked up by Joel's brother Tommy. The neighboring city has gone into total pandemonium with fleets of cars blocking the highway. They get into a crash. Sarah is injured and Joel has to carry her to safety. Tommy stays behind to keep the horde of infected at bay. Joel and Sarah run out the back and are met with a soldier. The soldier receives orders to kill everyone on sight. He hesitates a moment due to Sarah's age, but proceeds to shoot. The bullets miss Joel. Tommy shoots the soldier. And then comes the gut-wrenching beginning. A bullet hits Sarah in the gut, and she's clearly dying. This scene is brilliant because Druckmann wanted a deliberately grounded approach to Joel losing his daughter. In the behind-the-scenes documentary for the first game, it is shown that Troy Baker's first take was very melodramatic, one involving screaming and crying. The actual scene feels far more authentic because it shows that Joel is in shock and clearly looking for a way to fix Sarah. Only he notices that there's nothing he can do.
Sarah. Baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Come on. No. 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 Please. 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 Please don't. Please.
It's a truly heartbreaking scene which also sets up the tone for the entire narrative. This is a story that will kill children if that is needed. Furthermore, we get background on Joel's character, which will be further expanded throughout the game. So, at least in the context of the game, it makes total sense to start from Joel's core character flaw. A dead daughter he couldn't save. This will guide Joel's actions throughout the narrative, beginning with him being against smuggling a child, and then to protecting Ellie like she is his own child. This is actually something that is reflected in Pedro Pascal's interview.
I don't save Sarah's life, which is Joel's daughter, which is the event that shapes the character for the rest of his life.
This event also explains why Joel is so cynical about the world at the start of the narrative. His reason for living has been taken away and he has been reduced to a man intent on survival for the sole reason of survival. In my mind, Joel is only a few steps away from becoming Bill, a guy who literally has nothing else but survival on his mind. If you want to go down the path of character building through creative writing, Joel's quote-unquote want is to deliver Ellie to the Fireflies, and Joel's quote-unquote need is to confront the trauma that he has endured and find a new surrogate family through Ellie. The tragedy of The Last of Us is that Joel does actually face the traumas of his past, but that victory is taken from him. He refuses to take the photo of Sarah from Tommy, but he finally accepts it from Ellie after the two have faced several dangerous situations together. Only after having been seemingly healed from his past trauma, he is once again presented with the fact that the Firefly doctors will kill Ellie. It's another gut punch. This man just overcame massive trauma, and now, all of a sudden, he has to go through the same thing again, losing another daughter. I know there's been a lot of talk about what kind of a character Joel is post Part 2, launching a couple of years back. There are even subreddits dedicated to the Joel was a monster and Joel did nothing wrong viewpoints. I don't want to get into that in this video. All I want to say is that Joel reacting the way he did in the hospital in Salt Lake City makes complete sense for his character arc. He is a cynical man who finds a way not to be so cynical. Ellie represents hope for the entire world, but then again she also represents hope for Joel himself. So when Joel goes ballistic and murders all the Fireflies and, well, if you sneaked around at least the Firefly Doctor, saving Ellie makes total sense from a thematic standpoint and from the perspective of the character. With the reduced body count in mind, I wonder how they will handle this scene in particular. In the game, the player has the choice to kill dozens of Fireflies. In the show, it might make Joel seem too monstrous. Once again, Mazin's quote about the character death kinda makes more sense here. Joel going full-on Rambo might seem a bit incongruous with the grounded tone of the show, but then again, it might also lessen the impact of the ending. Not only does Joel kill many people, but he also takes the only hope for a vaccine from this doomed world. It should also be mentioned that according to the New Yorker article, Joel will also have some more human elements. For example, his hearing is impaired because he has been in firefights so often in the last 20 years. I think Joel's violence will also be a main focus on the show. As we have seen, there's a lengthy section in the show Bible that focuses on the violence in this world. Joel's past as a hunter will also be a part of his character. He has been on both sides, defending himself and also killing those who were defenseless. He understands the violence in this world more than anyone else. Furthermore, Joel's violence is tied to the second game, in which his carnage inspires the characters in that game to... Well, yeah, let's not spoil the second game. Having watched the trailers, one thing does worry me though. In the trailer, there's a quote from Joel that goes something along the lines of,
Rule 1, we keep our histories to ourselves. Rule 2, you don't tell anyone about your condition. Rule 3, you do what I say when I say it.
What I don't like about this line, having not watched the show by the way, oh my god, it feels so stupid to even complain about this. What I don't like about this line is that the character building in the game is very subtle. Joel doesn't state how he feels, which also builds his character. He's a man. He doesn't talk about his feelings, toxically, I suppose. He has spent the last 20 years of his life running from his past, his mistake, so Ellie bringing it up naturally gets shut down immediately. He doesn't state that we don't talk about the past. The player recognizes it from the subtext. But hey, maybe it'll make sense in the context of the show, we'll see. So, to sum up, the show will have to recognize that Joel is at a very cynical place at the beginning of the narrative. Through Ellie, he finds hope in a doomed world and a personal redemption. In the end, he decides to further his own redemption out of understandable selfishness and to doom humanity to more of the same. Once again, there are people who say that the Fireflies weren't even close to a vaccine and that Ellie's death would have been completely useless. Once again, I'm not going to get into this debate. There might be credibility to this point of view. I don't know, but to me personally, Joel's choice makes more sense if Ellie's death would lead to an actual vaccine. Ellie. Ellie is an interesting character in the sense that we got one version of her throughout the original release of The Last of Us, and then that version was slightly changed 7 months later with the release of the Left Behind DLC. That might sound dramatic, but I would venture a guess that many people were not aware of this DLC throughout the release of The Last of Us Part 2. Once again, I don't want to get into the weeds of that discussion, although now I see that I'm also tiptoeing around it. Ellie is gay. Simple as that. This doesn't make much of a difference to the original narrative, as it isn't discussed at all. Ellie even mentions her first kiss, Riley, but she describes her as a friend. Ellie's sexual orientation plays a larger role in the sequel. It would also seem that Ellie's sexual orientation plays a larger part in the adaptation, as the trailers have indicated that there will be an episode in which Ellie and Riley visit the abandoned mall, just like in the Left Behind DLC. The DLC is very interesting as it takes place both during the narrative of The Last of Us and before the narrative entirely. I suspect that the 6th or the 7th episode will be just about Ellie, while Pedro Pascal's Joel lies in a cold garage, having been pierced by a metal rod. During this episode, Ellie will scavenge for supplies to heal Joel, all the while the episode jumps between those events and the events of the shopping center. So kinda like Lost, I think. Or actually, well, no, you know, the original DLC also does that. Which is kinda like Lost. Okay, whatever. The episode will end on Ellie going out hunting, meeting David, and then David's men finding where Ellie and Joel are hiding. This will lead to the penultimate episode in which Joel rescues Ellie from David, and then the two begin their journey for the final destination of Salt Lake City. What I would like to see is a more robust depiction of Ellie's life. She's very awkward about her sexual orientation in the sequel, so maybe that could be a part of her character in the first season of the show. Then again, she's a child, so maybe this might come off as a bit creepy. Furthermore, I would like to see how people's views about sexuality changed in the 20 years after the apocalypse. The Last of Us Part 2 has a character that is being bigoted, hence the
bigot sandwiches.
Smells good.
So maybe they're going to lay the groundwork for the second season. I don't know. I would also like to know more about Ellie's mother, Anna. She's mentioned by Marlene in some tape recordings at the end of the game, but that's about it. It should be noted also that Anna will be in the show, as it has been confirmed that the original actor of Ellie, Ashley Johnson, will portray her. The trailers indicate that hiding Ellie's immunity, or the bite in general, will be made a large part of the narrative. So maybe there will be scenes where Joel and Ellie are captured and Ellie has to deliberately hide the bite mark on her arm or something like that. The initial setup could be about hiding Ellie's bite mark, and the payoff being later revealing the bite mark to David, tricking him to also releasing Ellie from imprisonment. Overall, it would be interesting to see how Ellie deals with the possibility of being humanity's only hope for a vaccine. It's a massive burden to put on the shoulders of a little girl, and it only becomes a present element at the end of The Last of Us and throughout Part 2. Damn, you really can see that Part 2 is Ellie's game. Like, so much of my current views about her as a character are informed by the choices that she makes in that game. As they are going for 2 seasons, it's pretty clear that they might be laying some foundation on the events of that game as well, so I guess I have to mention it. Okay, but focusing back on Ellie in the first game. It does seem like she will be the comic relief just like in the game. There's plenty of comedy to be mined from Joel being a grumpy old man and Ellie being an optimistic young girl. Admittedly, Ellie imitating to be infected only to be shut down by Tess didn't strike me as very funny from the trailer, but hey, it's difficult to be funny that instantly. Maybe it will get me in the actual show. Tess will be portrayed by Anna Torv. I hope I'm saying that correctly. It came out a bit Swedish, not gonna lie. Who some of you may already recognize from Mindhunter, the original tragic Netflix cancellation. Although it has never been officially cancelled, but there hasn't been a new season in a while, and, well, Netflix is Netflix, so yeah. It would seem that Tess plays a larger role in general in the adaptation. She's in several of the trailers, but then again that might be a coordinated misleading of the audience. Considering she doesn't appear in any other sceneries than the ones that are also in the beginning of the game, I would assume that she gets bitten and dies in the first 2 episodes, just like in the game. By the way, I'm counting on those being the first 2 episodes because Bill's Town is the 3rd episode, and at least in the game, before Joel goes to Bill's Town, Tess is already dead. So I would say that it's in the first 2 episodes somewhere. As we don't know much about Tess in the original game, it will be very interesting to see how they expand upon her character in the show. One of the things that I really like about the original game is that Joel and Tess's relationship, if you can even call it that, is kept very secretive and professional. They mostly discuss the business that they run together. Tess seems to be more emotionally in tune than Joel, and that's simply because when she is bitten, she urges Joel to carry out the task of delivering Ellie to the Fireflies, a task that Joel really doesn't want to do. So Tess really does see a glimmer of hope that has been completely snuffed out in Joel. At least that's my interpretation of their character dynamic. This works really well in the game. We don't need to know Tess's motivations, we only need to know that she goes from a ruthless smuggler to someone who actually sees the light at the end of the tunnel with Ellie. It should be mentioned though that this does present some problems. Expanding on Tess's character will easily throw off the balance of the original game. However, I don't think Tess not telling anything about herself through her episodes doesn't really feel truthful either. Once again, if there isn't gameplay, there has to be something there to replace it. Therefore, I suspect that we will receive a more expanded character arc for her. We will most likely hear about the business that she and Joel run, as well as the details about her past that are not in the game. What I don't want to see, I should make that very clear, and most likely will not be in the show, hopefully, is a forced explanation of her relationship with Joel. I mean, it would be genuinely terrible if she said something along the lines of like, Joel, how long have we been smuggling together? Remember when I met you 10 years ago? We were so young. Remember when I saved you from that clicker nest? Like, that would be terrible. And by the way, when I say relationship, I just realized that this is a problem in the essay itself. Like, I don't mean a romantic relationship. They're like business partner relationship. Is that a thing? I don't know. I think that's a bit of my Finnish bleeding through this essay. Well, anyway. I already floated the idea that the show might be jumping back and forth pre-pandemic and post-pandemic earlier, and that could be an interesting way to flesh out Tess's character. Maybe we learn something key about her character as to why she isn't as cynical as Joel about transporting Ellie to the Fireflies. It would be interesting to also get more about Joel and Tess's smuggling business, as in the sense like, why are they doing that rather than joining the Hunters or maybe joining the Fireflies, you know? I think in the business sense, like, it would be very interesting to see what kind of day-to-day moral dilemmas they also have. As there isn't that much of Tess in the game even in the first place, this is obviously just speculation on my part, but I'm kind of thinking on the lines of like, how could they expand Tess? And I think her relationship with Joel, business relationship once again, would be very interesting. Bill and partner. Bill is also a side character that we do not learn a lot about. In the game, he lives alone in an abandoned town intent on surviving alone. Bill feels like a character that has literally no other purpose in life than to survive. Bill constantly takes care of the traps in the town that he is inhabiting, even to the extent that he mumbles to himself about his routine.
All right. You gotta check the barricades again. You collect the simple shit and down the van for it. You know what that means? Taking all the supplies from the warehouse.
Okay, now he's talking to himself.
Bill?
This is also reflected in his personal philosophy about the world.
Seriously, you gotta take that kid back to where you found her.
I can't just take her back.
Then send her packing, let her find her own way. Look, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. A partner. Somebody I had to look after. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing. Getting you killed. So you know what I did? I wisened the fuck up. And I realized it's gotta be just me.
Bill, it ain't like that. It's
Bullshit. It is just like that.
This philosophy is later brought into spotlight when Joel, Ellie, and Bill stumble onto the corpse of Bill's former partner, Frank.
Jesus. What, you know this guy or something?
Frank,
Who the hell's Frank?
he was my partner. He's the only idiot that would wear a shirt like that. He's got bites here, and
I reckon he didn't want to turn, so he...
yeah, I guess not.
Frank's demonetized note is incredibly bitter towards Bill and shows that the two had a disagreement over leaving town, with Bill wanting to stay and Frank wanting to leave. I want more from life than this, and you could never get that, especially makes sense with Bill's current way of functioning. There's nothing but survival, so why even risk leaving the fortified town that he has already created? It's the perfect life. In a post-apocalyptic world, I suppose. Only, what's the point of living safely when you have no one to live with? The trailers have already shown that Bill's character will be a large departure from the original. Not only is Frank alive in this version, Bill even gets shot at some point in the show. So, what's up with this version? Is Bill not going to be as grumpy as he is in the game? I mean, you can see he's planting flowers with his partner, Frank. Let's just say his husband. Come on. He is going to be grumpy as he is in the game. I think the writers have moved back the timeline of Bill and Frank's relationship. Bill will be set on his ways as he is in the game. Frank will be the one who wants something different from life. I suspect that their conflict is going to be already ongoing when Joel and Ellie arrive to Bill's town. Well, Bill and Frank's town, I suppose. And this will cause Bill even more stress. Not only is he trying to keep his partner with him safely in his booby-trapped town, all of a sudden he will also have to deal with Joel coming in asking for a favor. Notably, finding the car battery, as they do in the game, is an incredibly difficult task, and Bill really doesn't want to do it. He doesn't take any risks, so maybe Joel forcing him to take this risk while also being embroiled in a lover's spat will weigh heavily on him. So, what will happen to Frank? I don't think him demonetizing himself is not an option, as it wouldn't make sense for the story. That's a verb, by the way. So here's my theory. Joel and Ellie will arrive in town with a group of hunters on their trail. Bill will embolden the defenses while they search for the battery. As was shown in the trailer, Bill will be shot at some point by these hunters, and I suspect that Frank will be killed by them. This leads to the same thematic conclusion as the game. Bill's complacency is the thing that eventually kills Frank. Although, in this version, some blame can be shifted onto Joel and Ellie, and, you know, adapting stuff is hard. Why are there already hunters chasing them? Maybe they're the Fedra agents, I don't know. I'm not a screenwriter. I expect that some version of this plot is going to happen in the show. I mean, it would be very weird if they changed the relationship struggles of Bill and Frank too much. Although, I really would like to see the good side also. Like, in the game we just get Bill's bitter ramblings about partners being a reliability and Frank's very, very bitter letter to Bill. So it would be nice to see the positive side of their relationship. I think the planting flowers scene is that. And I'm not gonna lie, this is the plotline that I'm most interested in going into the show. I can't wait to see what they do with this, especially knowing that it's gonna be different. Like I'm like actually very excited for it. Now, I could discuss other characters such as David, Marlene, Henry and Sam, Tommy, or even Jerry Anderson, but this essay is already too long, just based on it being just speculation about what the show could be. Furthermore, I think some things are better left unspeculated, as, you know, these characters haven't even been shown in the trailers. We know that some of these characters exist in the show. For example, we know that we'll get more about Ellie's mother, Anna, than in the game, so that's gonna be a thing. I'm not gonna speculate. There's nothing that I can base my speculations on, so it's probably gonna be wrong. And there's nothing I hate more than being wrong. But yeah, let's move on to the world building. One of the most interesting things about The Last of Us for me is the world building. From the beginning, we are shown that things have gone incredibly topsy-turvy in this post-apocalyptic setting. There's the government entity trying to establish order called Fedra, but the way they maintain their peace within the cities is, well, kinda sadistic. Then there's the freedom fighters, the Fireflies, who believe that they can actually restore peace to the world by a mix of terrorism and finding an actual vaccine. So in essence, Fedra is the tyrannical government and the Fireflies are the people fighting against them, trying to find an actual solution to healing the world. Although this is a oversimplification, the Fireflies have their problems. I'll just say that. The way they treat Joel at the end of the game isn't ideal, let's say. But yeah, I'm just gonna leave it that simple. I'm not gonna get into the weeds here. What we learn about these factions are mostly discerned from reading notes spread around the world and by examining the surroundings of the places these factions inhabit or have historically inhabited. I wouldn't be surprised if someone played The Last of Us and didn't pay that much attention to the politics of this world, as the more character-based narrative of Joel and Ellie is often more interesting. On top of the Fireflies and Fedra, there are multiple different factions and cities that have found a way to thrive in the post-apocalyptic landscape. I think thrive is a bit too positive, but yeah, we're going with it. Jackson, the town which Tommy inhabits, for example, is a self-sustaining group of people who are surviving just fine on their own through agriculture. They even managed to get power from the nearby hydro plants. On the other hand, there are also factions that have found less ethical modes of survival. For example, Joel and Ellie face a faction of hunters who control Pittsburgh. These hunters live solely off the people who stumble into the city by killing them and looting their corpses. According to the New Yorker article, this faction's presence will be further established by introducing their leader. This also feels like an expansion on the story, as being chased by unnamed faceless bandits doesn't feel as interesting as those bandits having an actual motivation for the terrible things that they are currently doing. I think these factions are going to be expanded upon to make them seem less faceless overall. This could also be applied to the other factions. Marlene is the obvious example because she is already in the game, but I think that her ideology about the current state of affairs will be more on display. I think a leader of Fedra might also be introduced through a television broadcast or something like that to show how tyrannical the world has become. This does also present an opportunity for the show to introduce the other factions across the US. They could, for example, subtly drop the name WLF or the Wolves and their location of Seattle, but I don't know, that could be a bit forced, and I don't honestly know if they have already been established in the timeline for The Last of Us. The final thing that I want to say about the world building as a whole is the following. In the game, there is a very brief section in which Joel, Ellie, Henry, and Sam venture into the sewers beneath Pittsburgh. We find different notes written by a character named Ish, who at first began living alone in the sewers, finding shelter there. After a while, and some hesitation, Ish decided to invite a passing group of people into the sewers. Joel finds the remnants of this quote-unquote faction in the sewers. There's living quarters, dining areas, a laundry room, and even a small classroom. It's very haunting as you see that people have recently lived here, but something has gone terribly wrong. What I really like about this section is that the exploring is completely optional. Some players probably sprint through this section, killing all the infected and not giving two damns about the backstory of the location. For me, it is a highlight of the game. I don't know how this section could be done without Joel and Ellie having a 5-minute conversation about the past of the place. Joel can organically find a note left by Ish or examine the remnants of this once thriving place. This just feels like one of those sections that is just completely untranslatable from an interactive medium to a non-interactive one. As we are wrapping up here, I would like to bring up one more key piece of information. In IGN's interview with the cast, Gabriel Luna mentioned that the show would also show events before the outbreak of the cordyceps. This was in reference to seeing the family dynamic between, presumably, Joel, Sarah, and Tommy even before the main story takes shape. So the story might be one of two things. It might be told chronologically as it is in the game. Joel and Sarah live their life until the tragedy during Outbreak Day happens. The show might elaborate on their dynamic and their current living situation a bit more to establish how much of a tragedy Sarah's death is to Joel. I got the perception that Sarah is kinda like Joel's best friend, even though she is also his daughter. The two don't banter like a stereotypical parent and child. So maybe there's more of snarky banter between the two, and when Sarah is killed, we as the audience feel like the banter has been stolen from us. In that moment, we are Joel and feel his pain. I think this will be the most likely way of tackling it. I was originally going to write a theory that Joel's tragic background is initially hidden and only later revealed to the audience, explaining why he is so cynical. Like kinda, at the penultimate episode, we find out that Joel actually has a dead daughter, which recontextualizes everything that he has been saying so far, why he is so cynical about the world and stuff like that. It's kind of like Chernobyl, which started by having the reactor explode and only later returning to the events before the explosion itself. However, I scrapped this idea as, number one, Pedro Pascal said in an interview that Joel is a broken man, which kind of implies that the audience should already know that he will have a dead daughter, so I don't think that's gonna happen. And two, so many people have already played the game, so making this a plot twist would be rather stupid. More importantly, I don't think making it a plot twist would really add anything to the narrative. An alternative to the chronological retelling of the story would be to feature many scenes before the outbreak itself. I think an organic way to do this would be to show parts of the different characters' past in conjunction with their current situation. The DLC Left Behind already does this, and this style of storytelling has been popular in other shows like Lost and The Handmaid's Tale as well. I think it could be a good fit and would give the showrunners more freedom to juxtapose the brutality of the post-pandemic world with the peaceful pre-pandemic world. I'm sure, for example, that Ellie's background will be told like this. Although, admittedly, Ellie specifically hasn't lived in a pre-pandemic world. She just experiences things from an earlier time in the post-pandemic world. Or maybe Ellie's story starts from her mother. Maybe we see Anna first, and then we move on to Ellie's past. Okay, so this is the brief outro that I do off script. First and foremost, seriously, thank you for watching this video if you made it here to the end. It really does mean a lot to me. And if you like this video, like this content, I hate that word. If you like this video, please do like, subscribe, and maybe comment. As far as comments go, I would really like to hear your thoughts about what the TV show will be. I think there's going to be some leaks. I think there already have been some leaks about what the show is going to be about, considering that the screeners have gone out and the critics at least have already seen the entire first season. I am very excited for this show, and I really hope that I kind of brought forth that mentality here. I think I'm a bit critical about the whole notion, but I really want to see this succeed. So let's hope it does. If there's interest, I'm gonna do a follow-up video after the series comes out, the first season at least. I think it will be 2 seasons though. So I'm probably gonna be doing a follow-up video if I get the inspiration for it, I suppose. Could be like how the adaptation worked, and or if it fails, then how it failed or something like that. I don't know. That's kind of cliche. That's kind of dumb. Maybe I'm not gonna do it at all. Yeah, I also have a second channel called Crit Live. It's CriticalCoffee Live. It's basically ripping off just a Pyro Live thing. Well, anyway, I will be probably reviewing the show week to week there, so if you're interested in that, give that channel also a subscribe, and I will be playing some games there as well. But yeah, as far as this video goes, it was very scatterbrained. I'm not a fan of doing things on a deadline. I noticed that I had to cut many corners while making this, which I'm not really happy about. But I'm glad that I got to write about The Last of Us finally. I've been looking for a in, so to say. Like, everything that there is to say about this game has already been said. So I kind of needed a fresh angle to do that. So yeah, okay, that's it. Once again, thank you to SourceBy91 and Shirako for making those walkthroughs on YouTube that I used for this video essay. Considering that I don't have a PS5 and I just wanted the better quality gameplay, I suppose. Okay, so that's gonna bring us to the wrap. Tell me in the comments, what did you think about this video essay and what are your predictions for The Last of Us? And do really tell me what I get wrong in the future. I mean, I'm gonna be aware of that anyway. I'm gonna be watching the show and kicking myself for all the wrong predictions. But yeah, see you in a few weeks, I suppose. Well, on the other channel. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Bye bye.